Hello, this is Wordplay with 4 poets from Bristol, and 3 of them always, quite often, perform together. So they are the Spoke, so I'm going to be asking about that. And we've also got Pauline, who performs on her own. The Spoke have all actually got books out with SEREN, which is pretty impressive. 2 of them came out late last year, and one of them just came out very recently, didn't it?
Monday,
Elizabeth,
indeed.
yeah.
Yes, Monday.
So, first of all, I wanted to ask, what are the benefits of working together as a group?
Well, first and foremost, the Spoke started out as a workshopping group. So we look at each other's work, make comments, sometimes accept the comments, sometimes don't. And we all gained from that in that we could go away and think again about our poetry with everyone's voices in mind and everyone's ideas in mind. We also love each other's work, so that's another benefit. Yes. We get exposed frequently to wonderful new poems. I mean, that's quite a privilege. And I think just being in a group, you experience different voices and different performance styles, and you learn so much from that. We've also managed to get quite big audiences to our events because we've drawn on, you know, the networks of 4 people. So yeah, you've definitely got a good following and a good name in Bristol. And you did actually come to Broome, didn't you, with all 3 of you,
yes,
and Claire Williamson, who can't be here today, but. That was a really great experience for us. So, where else have you been recently? Do you want to answer that one?
Yes, SEREN set up a festival, first poetry festival in Cardiff earlier this year, and our publisher SEREN is based in Bridgend. So we were the headline act on the Saturday night at the festival, both because Paul DEATON and myself had recently had books published by SEREN, and Elizabeth and Claire were upcoming publications. So together with a musician, we took part in that festival, which was very exciting. And we've also performed in Swindon and Bradford-on-Avon, a number of other places.
We're starting to lose count, I think, aren't we?
Yeah.
It's been so many years. But,
certainly a name on the scene, isn't it, the Spoke? Who kind of does the deciding what happens, or are you all completely...
the granddaddy. You won't like being called that, but Bob initiates a lot of our things, and he's just fantastic at that. But we all try to take responsibility for exploring gig ideas and things like that. We don't want one person to be doing it all. So
yeah, it's really nice.
Advantage of 4 people. Utilising different people's energies, but it keeps you on the straight and narrow, it keeps you focused. So obviously writing is a private activity in its process.
Yes.
But you can nurture through the social connection, and I think that's what we've done. Because also your mood dips in your writing process, but knowing that you've got a deadline, knowing that you've got 3 close friends committed, keeps you going when you get those spaces when perhaps you're not quite in your writing. There's many benefits, I think.
It sounds great. Do you find you have similar themes?
I think we're all individual voices, to be honest.
That's
different energies and different tones to the work. Yeah. We pick up on each other's tics, you know, when we're even words that we use too often that you can't necessarily notice yourself. We pick up on.
Yes, just the other evening, for example, we were working through some poems in preparation for Elizabeth and Claire's launch, and we noticed that 3 of us had poems which were using the phrase "I think of," and we had never realised that before. But they suddenly, within a very short space of time, having a number of poets who've all got poems about "I think of," seemed rather strange, and we had to do a bit of rejigging.
Change the set.
Tweaking.
Okay. Well, I noticed that you came from the Forest of Dean.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and then is it weird? Because now you live on Bristol Harbour.
Well, it's. I think I see it in a sharper relief now. The forest. I grew up in the Forest of Dean. I was born in London, and my teenage years I found it very frustrating. Not because the forest wasn't beautiful, but because it was difficult to get out and about and socialise. But now, going back, I get to enjoy it as if, you know, I'm sort of taking a break from the city, and I'm writing about it more and more. I think because I'm relaxed about it, and my parents are still there in the garden centre, so I've got a base there, and I'm appreciating it more now, I think. Definitely.
So, I mean, poets do go back to their roots. I suppose everybody in their creativity goes back to their roots a bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially if it's glorious roots like the forest, you know. It's a wonderful place.
So this launch that you just had very, very recently, it's to launch, what's the name of the...
The name of the collection is In Her Shambles.
Right. Could you tell us why it's called that before you share some with us?
Well, I've got a wonderful friend who is an artist called Greg Pickles, and I have to give him credit first and foremost because I was describing some of the themes of the book to him. And one of the themes is kind of magic, another is the female perspective and things like this. And he loves Terry Pratchett. I'm ashamed to say I haven't really read much Pratchett, but he described to me the witch's shamble in Terry Pratchett, which is a sort of cat's cradle with enchanted objects in it, I believe, to deter spells and things like that and create protection. And he did an image for me of a woman's hands with the cat's cradle and objects related to the poems, which I loved. And then I started thinking about the word shambles, and I thought about the idea of a wreck or a ruin, also the verb shambling, when you shamble along, and the street name Shambles. And I thought, actually, it's a really good word for the various themes in the collection, the chaotic minds of the different speakers, the women. Exactly. Yes, wonderful. In a good way.
Let's hear some from it right
now. Pleasure. It'd be a pleasure. Thank you. Crockery. I can't look at you. I keep my eyes on crockery. Notice you are split between glass, chrome, china. Your index finger, a pink glow in the salt cellar's skirt. Face, a pale glaze on white plates. The wine glass has peeled a crescent from your mouth. Each crease ridging the grease. I can't look at you. Instead, I watch your coffee ripple when you knock the table with a knee. As you leave, glasses clear. Spoons lose their dash of colour. I'm fascinated by the play Titus Andronicus, where the human body is a site of revenge. And in one such act of revenge, the central character's daughter, Lavinia, is raped and mutilated, her hands cut off and her tongue cut out so that she cannot identify her attackers. I've seen many productions of the play, some of which are recalled in the next poem, in which the hunt refers to the attack on Lavinia. It begins with a quotation from her uncle after he finds her. Following Lavinia. Who is this? My niece that flies away so fast? John. I spent a summer reading the Roman plays aloud in a yellow attic room in Coventry after John moved out. I read The Hunt while spotting grazes on paint, pale patches on the carpet, mapping where his furniture stood. Sitting at his desk, sinking nails into polish and wax from candles he'd burnt, plugged into wine bottles, drooling trails that cooled and whitened. I read The Hunt, gathering flakes beneath my nails. Neil. I watched The Hunt in Edinburgh from a stall which smelt of polish, a friend's fringe debut. I had seen actors rush, spit, edit, but Neil laid the lyric gently on her cheek, refused to cut her uncle's elegy to her limbs, her voice. Paul. I watched The Hunt with Paul on a pull-down screen in a Warwick lecture theatre. Desktop soft enough to sink a pencil tip in veneer, scratch my name. Paul was hungover, left on the shot where they staked her out on silvered wetland. Her new language scribbling from her mouth, her wrists, her fluent heart. Their names. She takes the staff in her mouth and guides it with her stumps and writes. They took her tongue, her hands, so she tried to write with driftwood, sand. The sea was too strong. Her words, little caves, water curled up in, blunting their edges. She tried to speak again, carved deeper. The sea was proud with storm, collapsed their walls, blanked the beach to a nonsense of weed, silenced the sand. One of the themes of the collection is water and waterways, or lack of water, as in the next poem. Dry. I didn't expect you to breach the dam, loosen my banks until my clay unclenched, dropped its stash of rocks. You sleeked my snarls of algae, brought a lush hiss to my throat, brown trout wafting their bodies. You eased my bite, sighs of silt slid from pebble seams. I breathed other salts, sediments, floated light was creamed with moon. Then you were gone, sun stealing you, leaving me slithers, patches, where my sand tried to keep you. Small darknesses tucked beneath my rocks, shrinking day by day. As I said to CRYSSE, I love going back to the Forest of Dean, and I just had to write a poem about the home I grew up in. I grew up in a garden centre called Pygmy Pinetum in Cannock Valley, right in the heart of the forest. And this is called Home to the Garden Centre, the Forest of Dean. We return when the garden flares, red, pink, orange rhododendrons and camellias, hydrangeas freeing their blue moths. To nest cones spit-stitched to the eaves, the gargoyle with moss on his hands, a nostril plugged with lichen. We return to paths ribbed with sleepers, bogey wheels spiked with cogs rusting on stream banks. To locked coal mines, unworked, cream-faced quarries, a forest still oozing iron, bedrocks greased with ore. We return to boss-eyed boar rutting on the verge, piglets with humbug stripes, to hunting, salt licks, culls, white flickers in the tails of fallow deer. We return to the stuccoed house, 2 miners' cottages knocked through, to the stutter of her singer as she hems Liberty prints for curtains, cushion covers, foot dipping, rising on the treadle. We return to her ceramic bowl beside the Belfast sink, shaped like a bellflower, black with tadpoles every spring, their mouths opening holes in the surface, their tiny sucks on our fingertips. The poet Dante Gabriel Rossetti, was married to Elizabeth Siddal, beautiful, beautiful woman with reddish coppery hair. His muse for many of his paintings, but also for his poetry. And when Elizabeth Siddal died, as a romantic gesture, Gabriel Rossetti buried his book of poetry in her hair. 7 years later, realising it was some of his finest work, he paid men in beer to exhume her to fetch the book. I could not resist writing a poem for poor Lizzie, and this poem is about various kinds of exhumations. Lizzie. I read of Dante Gabriele Rossetti tucking a book in Lizzie's hair. Highgate, plot 5779. Stowing hours spent, rhyming the planes of her face, wording her long neck, while she faded on laudanum in 14 Chatham Place. I understand burials. Delete Word files, type an email address in the Hotmail search box, click select all, delete, empty recycling bin, clear. After 7 years, he paid men in beer to prize the grave slab, spade glints knifing loam as they picked out his lyric to her lips, her auburn hair. I understand exhumations, recharge an old phone, slot in its SIM for text message streams. They plucked out his book with a Bible and a worm, leaves edged red, bound in calf skin, disinfectant reek when he unpeeled the rags. I open blank documents, select, copy, emails, text messages, paste old words to clean screens. He chose a new typeset, edited his metaphors for her lips, filled wormholes with new words for her hair, tweaked his meter to quicken her pulse. I understand edits, delete, replace, retype, right-click for synonyms, select all, scroll for Times New Roman. He rewrote her reds, her seductions, shames, the flames in her hair, selected new words for medieval rooms, gleams of lattice, arras, burnt perfumes, parted damask. I spell check, save as, rename, print, close, shut down. And finally, just to take you back to the forest, this last poem is about growing up in the garden centre and the various wildlife encounters we had there. And this poem is for my dad. Rescues. Fallow doe caught in the boundary fence. Fetlock trapped in the top straining wires. Wind plucking her fur as my father squeezed wire cutters until they bit, freed her to bolt, streak into bracken. Barely their weight of the pipistrel he scooped from the outdoor loo, as if a bit of night had torn away, wafted through. Their roost in the unused loft, tucking through the wrong hole, shadows in ceiling corners, black fruits he gently unpeeled to show us wings laced with limb. House martin chicks fledging early from the mud bowl of the nest, spit wattled to rafter and wall, too keen to muscle for flight. Picked from gaps in stacked compost pallets, soft tickle on your palm, the texture of breath, heartbeats batting his hand. There's nothing there, no weight in them, same with anything that flies. His gloved hands click-locking a stepladder, placing them back in the wrong nest, hoping they'd be adopted. Birds, shrews, mice, pried from the white portcullis of the cat's teeth. tiny bump of their pulse on his fingertips, thimble hearts pumping, final milliliters of blood. Black bathtub spiders, peeping legs through gaps in the tunnel of his thick tan fingers. A fractured buzzard by Cannock Brook, cowled in a bath towel. His 3 daughters, calling to him from their cities. Shrill cry of the phone. His voice, still brummy soft, saving us each time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Very sort of sensual and visual and it's quite grounded, isn't it? A lot of your work, I think, in the sense of you say it comes from childhood memories and things like that. And I noticed that moving swiftly on, as I think we need to now, is Paul, your book's called A Watchful Astronomer, which suggests to me we might go another way. Astronomy.
Astronomy. A watchful
astronomy.
Astronomy.
Okay. Do you want to say about that?
I guess it's a line from one of the poems, which came as the body of work grew, and really did seem in a natural way to represent the sort of themes of the book. So I feel fortunate because it seems an apt phrase, and I did name the book. I did have some other titles, but I think the aspect between it's a book about distances, essentially.
It's a great title because the watchful and also the idea of just astronomy, obviously, is about things well beyond us. And it got great reviews, didn't it? I read one review which said, I really couldn't put it down. And I think you can't really want better than that, really, in terms of analysis of your work. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be finding its way, which, I mean, I guess it's just one of those things, isn't it? It comes together, and then you have a publishing company, and you don't know where it's going, and you don't know who's picking it up. So it's lovely when something like that happens.
You had a lot of poems in poetry magazines and things, haven't you? Have they gone into the collection?
Yeah, it is. I mean, pretty much most of my published work is in the book, and a number of poems that didn't find their way to magazines, but it represents maybe the last 5 or 6 years.
Can we hear some of it, please?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
This is called Owl. I shuffle between rooms because I can't sleep. And I think of the owl I listen to on Dartmoor, flitting between branches, climbing the clumpy valley, invisible in darkness, announcing each move with a sharp kerwick that grew louder, traversing the row of river-tide trees, and me in the field's edge, risen to night and sharp-eared, listening until it landed on the lame locked holly, now near and present, as though it had landed on my own right shoulder. And as I stoop in darkness between doorways, wishing I was asleep, mind mysterious, head pitching like a handheld lamp, I wonder, what tree or branch was I vainly looking for? The owl flew on with a silk slow hush, a cape sweep of unclasped wings. And I knew I had been left by a creature who knows the night's hollows better than me, can let go into the dimness, unperturbed, can find in the black blindness what it needs to find. So my second poem that I'm going to read is called In Front of the Rock Garden. It's a self-portrait. I am close to finishing training in counselling, so one could say it's a slightly psychoanalytical approach to viewing myself when I was quite small. It's called In Front of the Rock Garden. Everything about me is perfect pose. For my mother's gaze. I'm staring straight at camera, but in an ambivalent must-I way. Not sure of the setting, nor my part. There's something strange, something large, left unexplained I'm trying to frame. Wary tilt of my sun-soaked quizzical head. An ageless question, who is me and who the not me? Already I hold tight my right to silence, to abstain. Already I forbear. This life struggle will never be easy. Behind my back, my hands, twisting each wrist in Chinese burns. We're at that time of year outside the studio, that is, where it's all very green, and the shock of growth. And I guess you might say that a lot of the poems in this collection are to do with winter, but here's something very much of the opposite, and it's called Profusion. Pushed or pulled the growth of your life. The grass gives way to weeds. The dandelions, like a massed tribe, came, camped, and now have gone. The clover cross stitches, multiplies its lattice, raises up putty white pom-poms, something for the bees. The spider starts to spin into summer's depths, a thickening, a deepening. The earth's riches, its priceless hoards, unstoppable, inexhaustible. The brambles bend, the lupins and foxgloves go up like skyscrapers. And everything in your life is unstoppable too. This force fuses you, makes some days difficult, so much of it you don't know what to do. Even though the title of the collection is A Watchful Astronomy, as certain reviewers have pointed out, there's a lot of family poems in here. I'm just going to read one today. Perhaps more poems about my father, but this is a poem about my mother, or a conversation, I should say. It's called Words. Late afternoon, I speak to Mum on the phone. She's sorting through her past. 400 or so odd-sized photographs. Well, you won't want to do it, she says, when I'm gone. I won't leave you that task. We switch tack, not from fear, from silent truth, what can't come back. We talk of mulish, rough weather, April squalls, the wind's choking embrace of a newly dressed willow, bringing it down, its road wreckage near her place. Dad's death was like that tree. She talks in tangents. Is this what she means? So I've got to read a Bristol poem. That has to happen, doesn't it? I live in South Bristol, and there's a beautiful park called Victoria Park, where you get tremendous views back across the city. This poem plays with the perspective that I find in the other poems. It's the sense of distances between things. Victoria Park. The trees transfixed. The whole long line of limes parade through the park. Here they dug down, grew strong. Here and only here they homed in, lost or stuck to a last move. A black square, this bold board, this park on a city's hill. The game doesn't complete. It will always be your turn in your world. always tea break, always unfinished. Life is paradox, the towering trees, the plum-pinned night, this slope of static kings, this world you walk through, never to be solved. This has become a bit of a favourite, which is I'm a runner, and I had never sort of managed, or at least tried to write about running. And I was kind of slightly pushed by my editor, can I write a running poem? It's the only running poem in the book, and people really seem to respond to this poem. So I feel I have to read it. It does account for why I'm quite lightweight and slimline. I'm wearing my running shoes today, just in case I get a little nervous and I'm going to hop out of here. It's called High in HANHAM. My mate Dave in front. I purr past Dave going up the wooded hill. Those bloody concrete giant steps. The guy in front is, well, in front. I peg it alongside the Avon, slick as swarfiger. Dave tracks me. The tall poplars shimmering quill feathers. The yellow brick towpath winds away. Back in the woods, climbing the hill, Dave whips past. For a moment, I reckon we can both catch the second place guy, but that is hubris, a fading false hope. Dave stretches his gain, flickering away like a fish. We hit the rope, tied to the bank like a croc slipway, and haul up. That's me all in, buried and gone. Dave's off across the footy field, killing it, wild helicopter arms. There's no stopping him. The suns of citrine blazed beyond the trees, casts a winter wax on everything. I lap the field nonchalantly, haloed. Time to cruise to the finish like I wasn't even trying. That sun, that lemon glaze. In the Rex bar afterwards, it's on everything. Carrot cake, circle of friends, crap, carpet. And I'll just finish with this poem, which for me, I think got my work moving. I think we need feedback, we need encouragement. And unless someone reflects that back to us, we're in the dark a little bit, I think. So this is a poem that gave me encouragement. It's called Sea Bream Dinner. And sometimes it is enough to only think about what to have for dinner, and to go out to the shops in advance, through the square beneath the lurching horse chestnuts, and over the long broken path slabs at midday, to buy fish fresh from the fishmonger's magician hands, and to get home in the evening, to cook with stained spoon and heavy pan what has been found first by a Cornish fisherman. And not to be in a devil's rush, not to high hurdle against the odds, a sprinter's dinner, but to gaslight the stove, to put the whole sea bream in the clay tagine carefully, as if it were your own parents you were laying to rest. With sprig of bay, splash of wine, slide this day's death into the oven with a softly worded message. Be wholesome, silver sea thing treasured. Let the white meat do its best.
Yeah, I see the watchful. There's a watchfulness in them. They're very surprisingly personal, surprising to me from that title, but also enigmatic. I can imagine rereading them and getting a slightly different mood each time. I think that the one about the little boy, the snapshot of the little boy, is kind of like a clue to the enigma. And also, I hope the camera's got your running shoes somehow. They are gorgeous. And I'm quite a fan of running. I used to run. I don't now. I did a marathon and thought I couldn't do better than that, so I stopped. 4.25 hours. One of the first veteran women. That was it. That was enough for me. But I thought that was a lovely poem about the running, and the last one about the fish. It's just beautiful. Something we should all say when we're feeling mindful about our meals, I think. Really lovely. I want to come to you, Pauline, because you are a Bristol poet, but you have a lot in common with them in that you came from somewhere else and now you write and work in Bristol. And you have a book out with Hearing Eye.
Yes, that's
this time, which is different from SEREN.
Yes.
And it's got a poem in it, I believe, that from the best Doctor Who poems in the universe.
Oh, it has, yes.
Yes, I just thought we should mention that.
Oh.
I don't know if you're going to read it.
Oh, I can do.
It's lovely. So, and I know you work in healthcare. Do you find that sort of feeds into anything you write?
I think it does. A few years ago, I was able to do some workshops. I actually work with people with drug and alcohol problems, and I did some workshops that with some service users.
Sort of therapeutic poetry writing, or
it invariably became therapeutic, but it wasn't set out that way.
poems always do. Don't
Yeah,
they?
it was very interesting. And I do have colleagues who do that sort of thing, but my role is quite narrow at the moment,
Right.
so I don't do that at the moment.
Right.
But there is an organisation called Lapidus, which I
Yes.
keep in touch with.
I think we've got a film poet, Rose Flint, who I think is quite.
Oh yes, I saw
Yeah.
her at the Poetry Cafe in Frome when I came there.
Yes, you did come, didn't you, 3
Yes,
years ago?
yes.
And you met Helen Moore there. You were telling me about that.
Yes, I was telling CRYSSE it was quite a valuable thing for me. I was working nearby Frome, and by design, not chance, I went to the Poetry Cafe, and by chance Helen Moore gave me a flyer for her poetry class. And it was actually quite inconvenient to go back the next night and go there and then go there every week. But I did, and I was so glad. And it's just one of those chance things that happen. You know, it enabled me to make my poetry community at that time, because I think although I write on my own, I always have poetry communities to belong to.
Yeah. For anyone watching who isn't so familiar with the Frome poetry scene, Helen Moore is a very big presence. She's an eco poet and quite. She's moved now up to Scotland, but she's still kind of quite big on the eco poetry scene, quite boundary breaking, really, isn't she?
Absolutely.
And she came back to Frome recently, and we had a little thing.
She's a
Three
fabulous
Swans.
reader, isn't she?
She is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, fabulous reader.
Yeah.
She is, and an excellent teacher, very inspirational.
So you've got a bit of a link with Frome already. Yeah. But where do you mainly read in Bristol?
Well, I help with my friends Stella Quinn-Levin and Helen Shepherd, who is a very wonderful poet. We run an event called Satellite of Love, and actually Elizabeth Parker and Robert Walton are reading there on Wednesday.
Thrilled.
And that is
Anyone
a
watching in
monthly
Bristol?
event.
Put that in your diary.
Yeah, please come, it would be brilliant. So I read there sometimes, but also the Arts House in Bristol has a fortnightly open mic, and there are lots of really active poetry promoters in Bristol. Quite a lot of poetry slams there, which I'm a bit shy to go in a poetry slam, really.
But they are good. Yeah, my first introduction, I think, to performance poetry was Blah 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 at the when Bar and Vincent was running it. Sorry, I won't get into reminiscing now, but great days. Would you like to share some of your poems with us, please?
Yes. So, well, I hadn't planned to read the Doctor Who poem. I just thought it's so funny that it could be definitively one of the best poems in the universe, hey? So the poem, a lot of this book is about music, and the poem's called Delia, Derbyshire. In one of those places that isn't quite anywhere, the hard shoulder of the M62, retuning the radio, the sounds come through in querulous spikes as the voice of Delia, Derbyshire, syncopates the night. She did her work back in the 60s, a sassooned and mini-skirted goddess of geeks. Years later, she got credit due. She was with Oram and Granger in the radiophonic workshop, but Delia wrote the music to Doctor Who. Images of outer space inside the eyelids of your inner space evoke those long ago Saturday egg and chip tea times when Delia's multiphase sonic innovations homed us into the tingling science fiction comfort zone. Fractal patterns breaking in a world where identity slips and time trips over. She was queen of synesthesia, if you can have synesthesia in black and white. And now we are stuck on this car in the Pennine Highway. If we could see through the fog to the other side of the motorway, we'd be watching our younger selves coming the other way. Is it interference between stations, or does the voice of Delia Derbyshire syncopate the night? And that was a real encounter on the M62, and we were stuck in the snow. So I'm going to sort of change the tone a bit by reading, might make people feel slightly queasy, this poem. And it is based on experience at work, just a sort of simple physical task of taking blood, which is called phlebotomy. Phlebotomy. Taking blood is science and art, an act of will. Sometimes even robust veins disappear like worms chasing down into earth. Today, I am in control. I say, breathe out slow, and you don't feel the needles sliding in. Already, liquid jewels fill the tube, lacquered red, packing darkness. I loosen the tourniquet, press cotton wool, tilt the tube to prevent clotting. You pull down your sleeve, I take out my pen. We are both relieved, a bit skittish, united in surviving this small challenge. And I've got a poem about Bristol, which is sort of topical about something that I'm very angry about, but it just touches on that lightly, really. I wrote it a long time ago. It's called Regrets, and it's set in St Werburgh's, where I live. Geraldine came over on the Windrush. She's been a widow far longer than a wife. In her backyard, she keeps rabbits and plantain, runner beans that flower red in July. We are neighbours. Everything we do touches her. She ignores the sound of scratch guitars on summer afternoons, but when I load the washing machine, she's on my case, claims that the soap suds water infiltrates her drains. She invites me round during the spin cycle, shows me evidence which only she can see. I say, I'm sorry, but what else is there to say? Her son says she's losing her memory. Her mind's like a cheese grater, raddled with gaps. She talks about Jamaica as if she still lives there, and her obsession with water can't be shaken away. I say, I'm sorry, and she says, stop saying sorry, woman. If you say it one more time, I'll bash you on the nose. I wash my clothes at night time now. I hope she's taken her hearing aid out as the juddering reaches its peak. I'm sorry that I've been an absentee neighbour and that we've never had a real conversation. Stories of the Windrush and Jamaica and her long dead husband. All I represent to her is dirty water, swirling an imaginary frothing in the drain, and my knee-jerk English sorries, bland as beige curtains. Geraldine dresses scruffy now, not smart like she used to. I shake her hand and hold it longer than necessary, feel her warmth against my palm. Is that it? One more or not? And I'm going to read the first poem in the book. It's a book about very diverse things. And this is a kind of love song to community, really, and music. This is the band who sleep in my house. I've never met them before, but I've seen the hummocky shapes they make when sleeping. Their hair spread out over cushions in the early mornings when I trespass into my own sitting room with a shriek of sorry, which makes them stir, but they'll never remember. These are the kids who test the resilience of their livers with BYOB and teacupped whiskey, night after night upstairs in pubs and in community halls, pushing the envelope of indie with loud, ripping vocal cords and vintage shirts. These are the kids who one day will watch their own kids on stage, just like the two of us, sharing cheap Merlot, linked in the long packs of friendship, the grey in our hair shining like glitter, standing on chairs for a better view, dancing with care. There's a long way to fall.
Thank you. Short and sweet and wonderful. Again, very personal and I love your sort of storytelling. It really felt like a kind of listening to stories, didn't it? And the Windrush one particularly poignant, obviously, at this time.
Yes, it's something I'm very angry about, really, to think about my neighbours in the community where I live and how they've been treated. But I do like to tell stories for different reasons, really. Some of them are quite personal. And fortunately my family, my daughter's a musician, and fortunately she was okay with the poems, which is good.
That's so lovely. It's quite a striking choice of words. I loved skittish when you've just been doing the medical process.
Such a relief to do it.
Yeah, no, marvellous, thank you. And a very different mood. And I don't think I said that the name of your book, because people can buy it, can't they? Can you?
Yes, the book's called This Is the Band.
This is the Band, because...
it's the first line of one of the poems, and I thought it kind of brought together the diversity in the book, because it's about lots of different subjects. And can I just mention, I'm going to have a launch with a band of poets who have very kindly agreed to read with me, and that's Glenn Carmichael, Helen Shepherd, Rowena Knight, who's a poet who's just moved from London, and Wendy Young, who's a poet from London, and that's at Foyles in Cabot Circus on the 1st of June.
Right, are you on Facebook?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, well, if you put that out to anyone here, and we'll make sure it goes out.
Thank you.
Marvellous, thank you. Back to Spoke, Bob.
Hi, CRYSSE.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you, again, published by SEREN, and I think anyone who's watching from Frome will be familiar with this cover, because you came and read from Sax Burglar Blues, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
When it first came out. And you read a wonderful weaving poem, because Frome is a weaving town. We all loved that, and I forgot to ask you if you're going to read it today.
If there's time, I will.
Well, let's make sure there is time then. Let's move on, because I did just want to ask you why you had a gap of 39 years between publishing your first book and your second.
Life has some funny ways, and as I'm predicting at the moment, it'll be another 39 years before the next collection comes out. Who knows what gets in the way, but something stopped me writing for a long time, and even when I resumed writing, it took quite a long time to get the confidence and to get the collection of poems together and to feel as though there was something that was worth bringing together.
Yeah, actually, on a serious note, that is why poets all need each other, just as much as musicians, not always in the end product, but in the support. And that's why going to open mics is so good, because you get to communicate your words and get feedback and everything. But okay, well, if it's, I think we should now hear some of it. We've been waiting so long.
Thanks, CRYSSE. I think in miles, Frome is about halfway between Cardiff and London. And tomorrow at 12:30, there'll be great rivalry because Cardiff City are playing Reading and Fulham are away to Birmingham. And the outcome of those two games will decide whether Cardiff City or Fulham gains automatic promotion to the Premiership. This isn't a football report, but my father, who's 96 years old, happens to be Cardiff City's oldest fan and still goes to every game. So my first poem is called, appropriately, Up the Bluebirds. And I hope that because Frome is halfway between London and Cardiff, you'll be very neutral in listening to this. Up the Bluebirds. Season on season, week on week, your irrepressible optimism on the phone. Down the line, I hear the chant of the home crowd. See the pitch where the ball arcs between boot and upright, or hangs in the wind over upturned heads. And yes, I try to share that urge of joy as the net bulges, and you leap from your seat, arms upthrust, to roar for the goals that justify your lifelong fervour. Week in, week out, each word you speak, the keeper's saves, the striker's misses, the names of players I've never heard of, the tactics, the ref's outrageous decisions, spins from your mouth like a string of bright rosettes in some conjuring trick. I listen, ask questions, enthuse. Somewhere in a wardrobe in my home, a bluebird scarf, bought years ago outside the ground, lies folded in the dark. The next poem I'll read is the title poem of this collection, Sax Burglar Blues, which I normally play with a saxophone, but I'm not going to bring that pain to listeners in Frome today. It is based on a true experience when my tenor saxophone was stolen. So it's a kind of possibly a revenge poem for the person who stole it. Actually, he did end up in the clink. Sax Burglar Blues. As he crept through the darkness to ease you from the stand where you sat like a swan in the reeds, could he hear your stabs and riffs, fierce and rhythmic as wings beating the waters, rising into the groove of the air? And when he touched you, hand in glove, fumbling your gleaming mechanisms, your keys clumping in his grasp, did he hear your screech of protest, the upper octave alarm of a hawk squalling on the leash? He took you apart, dismantled note from note, your smooth arpeggios, your bebop solos, squeezed the bell beneath his arm, twisted out the crook, slipped the mouthpiece from the cork, and stooping to zip you piece by piece into the bag, did he share the night owl haunts of your rambling blues? Could he imagine your bottom B flat, profound and plaintive enough to rouse a seal from the ocean's depths? I think I might just have time to read the weaving poem, which recognises that Harris Tweed is died from the wonderful surrounding waters, plants and animal life. Making a herringbone Harris Tweed garment. She sews the black and grey, the dye of the minky whale, the slow, the cormorant's wing, wave, machair and sky, the weaver wove from the yarn. She sews the black and grey and blue, the dye of the mussel bed, the myrtle, the kittiwake, wave, machair and sky, the weaver wove from the yarn of the weft. She sews the black and grey, the blue and orange, the dye of the skate, the autumn fingers of apricot club, the painted lady, wave, machair and sky, the weaver wove from the yarn of weft and warp. She sews the black and grey, the blue and orange and brown, the dye of the kelp, the leaves and bark of the birch, the corncrake, wave, machair and sky, the weaver wove from the yarn of weft and warp on the beam. She sews the black and grey, the blue, the orange and brown and red, the dye of the starfish washed up on the shore, the crottle, the damselfly, wave, machair and sky, the weaver wove from the yarn of weft and warp on the beam and loom. She sews the black and grey, the blue and orange, the brown and red and green, the dye of the crab in the bladderwrack, the blossoming broom, the lapwing's plumage, wave, machair and sky, the weaver wove from the yarn of weft and warp on the beam and loom in his croft. She sews the black and grey, the blue, orange and brown, the red and green and white, the dye of the windswept dune, the mountain hare in its winter coat, the cirrus clouds, wave, machair and sky, the weaver wove from the yarn of weft and warp on the beam and loom in his croft on the outer isle. Thank you.
That was fabulous, and they've all been fabulous. They've been so diverse and so showing where the poet can go, and yet accessible, which is really important. That, you know, particularly, I really don't know what to say after everything I've heard today.
You, CRYSSE.
Thank you, CRYSSE.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. Thank you to try and do it in the right order. Elizabeth Parker, Paul Deaton, Pauline Seward and Bob Walton. And I hope we see you in Frome again, and I hope everything goes really, really well, all your plans and things, because you've got some terrific work there. Thank you for sharing.
And thank you to
CRYSSE.
Visual Radio Arts.
And Visual Radio Arts.
Thank you.
Thank you.